The Philadelphia Eagles did everything right in building this team, and it still didn't work. Plus, how the Derek Carr market is shaping up and what that means for the future of the Green Bay Packers. All of that on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I was struck watching the Super Bowl last night because in the first half, it looked like this is the best team in the league. They're the most complete roster, and they were showing it. They had, for the most part, shut down the Kansas City Chiefs offense, as shut down as you can be when Patrick Mahomes is your coach and Andy Reid is your quarterback. Just 14 points in the first half. And the offense was rolling over a Chiefs defense we knew was just okay. They've been playing much better in the second half, and there was all of this talk coming into the game. Certainly from the Chiefs supporters, that, the Chiefs defense, it's actually better than you realize. Look at these EPA numbers since this time and this change, and this correlates with this and this. You give up 35 points. But the Eagles, this was one of the best defenses in the league all season. They gave up 38 points, and it could have easily been 42 if Jerick McKinnon wants to score, but he didn't at the end of the game because it would have given the Eagles the chance to get the ball back. If he goes down in bounds, which he did, you can run the game out, which they did. All of this in a year where the Eagles have an easy schedule and were incredibly healthy. They, I believe, started the same 22 players throughout the playoffs as they did, and they did in the Super Bowl, as they did on opening day. That is remarkable health. If the Packers had done that any of the last 4 years, they probably win the Super Bowl. But they didn't. But this is why I bring this up. Because the Eagles did everything right. They did everything you're supposed to do. Everything Packer fans have been calling the Packers to do for years. They went out and they made big money moves. They signed Hassan Reddick when they already had a quality pass rush. They made a trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson with the understanding that there are some unique things about his personality that can make him combustible. They said, you know what? He's a really good player. He was terrific for this team. They go get Robert Quinn. They bring in Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. They make the monster receiver trade for A.J. Brown. They give up a future first-round pick. They pay him the top of market deal. They surrounded their young quarterback on the rookie scale contract with all kinds of talent. They're over the cap, according to Spot Track, in 2023. So they had to line up all of this capital. And they won all the games. Well, except for one. Except for the only one that ultimately mattered. Yes, 31 teams end their season in a way that is not what they were hoping for when the season started. And so that makes this inherently problematic to draw some of these big sweeping conclusions. The Eagles' season was successful by almost any measure. Except, here are the 2023 free agents on the Philadelphia Eagles. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave, Jason Kelsey, James Bradbury, Isaac Suomalo, TJ Edwards, Robert Quinn, Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph, Miles Sanders, Kaiser White. Essentially, their whole defensive front, really their whole front seven, because they're 2 starting linebackers, 2 starting offensive line, their pass rush depth, the key pieces that they acquired in the secondary, Bradbury and CJ Gardner-Johnson. They have very little money. It's 10 starters who need a new deal, plus their long snapper. And Jalen Hurts is going into the last year of his rookie wage scale contract. He is going to have to get paid sooner than later. And like by sooner than later, I mean in the next 6 months. You can't let a guy who played as well as he did in the Super Bowl, and Jalen Hurts was incredible in the Super Bowl. You can't let that guy play on a lame duck final year of his rookie contract. Now, they could extend him and have the extension not kick in until 2024, and they can push some of this money down the road. He's making a song on his rookie wage scale deal, given what he has produced for them, at the very least, just this last season. But he starts to get really expensive really fast. And once you start paying a quarterback, he better be an elite quarterback. Can Jalen Hurts do that? We saw the flashes of it in this past season when everything around him was perfect. But the Eagles had the best roster in football. It was the best, most complete, the deepest. They had star players all over the place. They were balanced. They could run the ball. They could throw the ball. They could play defense. They could stop the pass. They could rush the passer, one of the all-time great pass rushes. This was a complete football team. They can be really good next year. They probably will be really good in 2023. Howie Roseman is a genius making the money work. But there's only so much money you can move before you start having to make difficult choices about the players who can be here. You're going to lose some of that depth. You're going to lose some of that high-end talent just because these are really good players and they're going to get a lot of money. And it may come to the point where you just can't afford to bring back all those guys. All the names that I mentioned of the top best players, some of those guys are going to be gone. And yes, you can draft Cam Jurgens and think he can give you 80% of what Kelsey gave you at center. Kelsey, probably the best center of his generation. And yes, Hassan Reddick is going to backfill, and Josh Sweat is going to backfill what you might lose if Brandon Graham walks. And you have Jordan Davis to give you what Javon Hargrave is walking out the door with. But Jordan Davis got hurt. He was a rookie. You had to sign Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph and actually play them meaningful minutes because your rookie couldn't do more than he did. And most rookies are bad. So yes, the Eagles have 2 first-round picks. Their roster is just not going to be as good in 2023. Why am I bringing this up? What does this have to do with the Green Bay Packers? I hinted at this yesterday. You can do everything right and still come up short. So much of this comes down to luck. If that holding penalty at the end of the game isn't called, maybe the Eagles win. And that's another Super Bowl loss for Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But maybe Dee Ford doesn't go offside in the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs get a stop and Mahomes goes to a Super Bowl a year sooner and wins one. Maybe his entire offensive line doesn't get hurt against the Bucs and we actually see a competitive Super Bowl in that Bucs-Chiefs game. We're 2 plays away from Patrick Mahomes changing the number of his Super Bowl count by double. He could have 4 already, but he only has 2, and he could just as easily have 1 or 0. He needed to come back against the 49ers to win that one. He needed by the way, a late touchdown sealed that on the ground. Not even a Patrick Mahomes play. And this is true of all the greats. Yes, this is an Aaron Rodgers open. Tom Brady doesn't win that Super Bowl without the tuck rule. Tom Brady doesn't win against the Seahawks without Malcolm Butler getting an interception at the 2-yard line. That game was supposed to be over. Tom Brady, how many clutch kicks did Adam Vinatieri hit over the course of that Tom Brady, Bill Belichick playoff run? If he gets hurt, if he's 80% as clutch as he turned out to be, we look at Tom Brady very differently than we ultimately do now. If David Bakhtiari is healthy, Tom Brady probably doesn't win that Bucs Super Bowl because the Packers probably win that Bucs Super Bowl, or the 49ers. If the Packers don't have an all-time special teams meltdown, had nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. Now, the Packers didn't score enough points in that game. They didn't score enough points against the Bucs. They didn't score enough points against the Seahawks. And there are some reasons for that. But so much of this still ultimately comes down to luck. I don't think the process for the Packers, now this last offseason notwithstanding, I have some issues with the way that they handled this last offseason. But heading into 2020 and heading into 2021, I thought they did a very good job of putting together, if not the most, one of the most complete rosters in football. I thought that they were the best team in 2020. I thought they were the best team in 2021. Now, they weren't in 2022. We saw that play out on the field. They're still a pretty good team. If you look at some of the advanced numbers, a top 10 team. They're still, if you look at the futures for next season, they're behind the Cowboys, they're behind the Eagles, they're behind the 49ers. That's it. It's them and the Lions. They're ahead of the Vikings, who just won this division because everyone knows they're frauds. People assume the Giants are going to regress because the Giants are almost certainly going to regress. It almost feels defeatist and nihilistic to bring it up this way. But it's true that so much of this, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because I think the Chiefs are proof that the more you knock on the door, the more eventually you can kick it open. 5 straight AFC Championship games. 3 Super Bowls, 2 wins. It's sort of like my parents always told me, you apply for jobs to get the interviews, you interview for jobs to get the job offers, and you get job offers to get the jobs. You can't do the last part without getting the first part. You can't get to the Super Bowl if you don't get to NFC Championship games if you're the Packers. And you can't get to NFC Championship games if you don't win in the divisional round. So that's why Matt LaFleur should get credit for first round buys, 2 of them. This team should get credit for divisional round wins against Seattle and LA, beating Super Bowl champions Sean McVay and Pete Carroll. Super Bowl champions Russell Wilson. Now, Russ is whatever now, but they lost to Tom Brady. They lost to Jimmy G twice. But the point is, sometimes you can just catch the wrong matchup. They were such a better matchup for LA in 2021 than San Francisco. They just got a little unlucky. And the Rams don't win that Super Bowl if not for Bukowski Tart dropping a pass and Aaron Donald on 4th down, or Cooper Kupp getting open a million times late in the game where the Bengals had no response. The Rams got a little lucky that was the Bengals because Patrick Mahomes had a second half meltdown against the Cincinnati Bengals. If that's the Chiefs probably run them off the field. In the NFL, it's so matchup dependent and there's so much luck involved that, again, you can do everything right and still lose. Now, this is not to absolve some of the bad process stuff that we've seen in Green Bay over the years, but it is a good reminder that just because you don't reach the mountaintop doesn't mean you didn't have a great chance to get there and put yourself in really good position to get there. Ultimately, though, you still have to do it, and it always, even for the teams that seem to be having the amount of success that your team isn't, it always takes an enormous amount of luck to get there. All right, we're going to talk about the Derek Carr market because we got some clarity on that over the weekend. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an opportunity for you to be your best self. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down. You may feel overwhelmed, like you're not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you. Because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. We got some information over the weekend, and by the time you hear this, who knows what the market will look like, who knows what reporting will be out there. But in a matter of hours, the Raiders are, or maybe now, are going to release Derek Carr. They have to, they're going to, and part of the reason is because Derek Carr refused to take a pay cut from the New Orleans Saints. I assume his thought process is, well, if I'm going to take a pay cut, I want to have more flexibility in where I'm going to go. And before I definitely take a pay cut, I'd like to see what the market would bear out. And I think that's a really smart thing for him to do. Also, in the meantime, the New York Jets have hired Todd Downing to be their passing game coordinator. Todd Downing has a relationship with Derek Carr from their time with the Raiders. Derek Carr won 3 Pro Bowls with Todd Downing. And so there is a connection there. There's, of course, the Aaron Rodgers connection with Nathaniel Hackett. There's the Jimmy G connection with Robert Saleh. There is also a Ryan Tannehill connection with Todd Downing, though I don't really see that. Ryan Tannehill did not play great last year. That passing offense was a mess. And so I don't know if there's a line to draw so clearly there. But the Jets, it's the worst kept secret in the league. They want to go get a veteran quarterback. We know that. Are they going to pay top dollar? Now that we know Derek Carr is not an option in the trade market, now it starts to get interesting because Derek Carr, not going to get moved for picks, just money. Jimmy Garoppolo, not going to get moved for picks, just money. Aaron Rodgers, if you want him, going to be moved for picks. It's going to cost you stuff to get Aaron Rodgers. So just how big does the league see the gap between how good Aaron Rodgers is and how good these other guys are? Now, if I'm the Jets and I am making no secret that what I want is a veteran quarterback, then I'm pretty desperate for the best possible option available to me, right? But let's say ultimately the team decides, yeah, it's not Derek Carr. The Saints decide they're going to pay Derek Carr, and the Jets get Jimmy G. Well, that leaves the Raiders without a quarterback. Enter Aaron Rodgers potentially. We'll see what Carolina wants to do at quarterback. We'll see what Tampa Bay wants to do at quarterback. There's going to be a bidding war for the services of these guys because a lot of teams are going to be looking around, especially if it does look like Aaron Rodgers is going to be headed out of town, and go, no Tom Brady, maybe no Aaron Rodgers. Why not us? So for all the reasons that I made the case about a week and a half ago for Green Bay that maybe the wide open NFC is a reason for them to hold on to Rodgers, or maybe it is an even better reason to say we think we can win with Jordan Love. There are going to be even more teams in the NFC going, wait, with a real quarterback, we could win a bunch of these games. Like I just gave you the list of the top teams in the NFC. The Eagles are going to get worse. We don't know what's going on with the San Francisco quarterback situation. Tampa Bay is a pretty appealing destination if you're a quarterback. I think Derek Carr makes a ton of sense with that team and in that offense. I'd be pushing for that if I were them. The Commanders say that they're going with Sam Howell, but if they could get Jimmy G, would they do that? The Colts need a quarterback. There are so many QB needy teams. They're not all going to be in a position to draft one. So this is a little bit back to what I was talking about yesterday with this idea that the Packers are just waiting on Aaron Rodgers, I think this price could get high for Aaron Rodgers because there's only so many guys. Even if we take for granted Aaron Rodgers is not the same guy, and I don't fully do that. I mean, I don't think he's probably likely to play at the level he did in 2020 and 2021 moving forward, just because history says a guy that playing like that this late in his career is unlikely. And once we see the regression, it's not likely to come back. But Rodgers proved us wrong once before. Still, even if he's 85, 90% of that, he's not, instead of being the 14th or 15th best quarterback in the league, which is what he was this last season, and that's being generous, by the way. A lot of the numbers say he's more like the 22nd or 23rd best quarterback. Then, and he's more like the 6th or 8th best quarterback. How many teams in the league with the 8th best quarterback could reasonably say we can win the Super Bowl? I mean, the Jets certainly qualify. I think the Bucks qualify. I think the Panthers could talk themselves into it, especially with the draft capital that they have at their disposal. I think the Colts can talk themselves into it in the division that they play in with the capital that they have at their disposal. So there are a lot of teams out there that could be like the Raiders are going to talk themselves into it, even if it's a little bit of a stretch. Josh McDaniels, Aaron Rodgers, or Jimmy G. But the thing about the Raiders is they're not in the Derek Carr market. They're only in the Jimmy G or Aaron Rodgers market, probably. And so that narrows their scope. That amplifies the intensity with which these teams are going to covet the players potentially available. And if you're Green Bay, teams have called. We know teams have called. You have to start getting a feel for where these teams are, because you're going to be able to pit them one against another. And if you don't do that, you're derelict in your duty to make your team maximally improved. They have to find a way to get the most if there's a deal to be made. And if there's not, then this is all moot. And then you have to pivot to, okay, what else can you get? That's another reason, by the way, this needs to get done soon. I'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, let's talk about Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you've got to try a Built Bar. I'm been doing pretty good eating healthy in 2023. And one of the reasons is I don't have to sacrifice taste when I want something to fuel my body, because I eat Built Bars. Covered in 100% real chocolate. Love all the puff flavors. Just restocked my cabinet with the puff flavors. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. What more is there to want out of any food? And now you don't have to wait for your order from Built.com, though you can still go and order from Built.com. You just do your regular shopping at Sam's Club or Walmart. They have Built Bars, so go check them out and just pop in and grab them. It's that easy. Go check it out for yourself. So I mentioned the timeline here. One of the reasons why you want this done soon, and certainly before free agency, you need a decision done soon, is you want to take advantage of teams like the Cardinals, of teams like the Panthers, of teams like the Texans, who may have some players, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Cooks, who want out, and you don't give them the opportunity to go sign some players in free agency and build around a team that says, oh, well, maybe I can stay around for a little bit. Now, the Cardinals is going to be a junk show no matter what, because Kyler Murray is not going to be back until at least midseason, maybe not at all next year. Early reports are Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator, and Lou Anarumo are the headliners in the Cardinals search. Shane Steichen going to go to Indianapolis. By the way, another reason why the Eagles are not going to be the same this upcoming season. That brain drain is real. Even if you bring back a bunch of guys, they're probably not going to be as good. You got to bring in new coaches. You got to reacclimate to everything going on. Some of that turnover is good. I've talked about that before. The churn can actually be a positive thing in a lot of ways. but not when you have coaches who are leaving because they're good enough to go be head coaches. Whether or not they are, Nathaniel Hackett, I think is a reasonable, be like, was he a great head coach? No. How much did it hurt losing him? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But you want to get this done soon so that if you're Aaron Rodgers, you can start recruiting. Hey, come, let's one last shot at this. Free agents. You send some texts to someone like DeAndre Hopkins, to Brandon Cooks, see what their appetite is for movement. There's been these reports that, if the Bengals can't get something done with T. Higgins, that he could get the Tyreek Hill trade. Is that something that the Packers could consider? Someone who is on both the timeline for right now and on the Jordan Love timeline, if that's something that they go to. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd give up a lot for T. Higgins, even if he was a guy that the Packers did not love pre-draft for a lot of reasons. Did not fit their type, did not test well athletically, did not run fast, but has just come to the league and immediately been an awesome, awesome player. This needs to get done soon so you can start planning for the rest of your offseason. Now, the Packers, it's not like the Packers have been sitting on their thumbs waiting for, the rest of the league to just pass them by. They're looking at free agents. They're watching the draft. They're trying to figure out what they can do. But they have two paths, and they don't know which path they're going to walk yet. Now, do they have a lean? Maybe. Do they have a feel? Maybe. Did they set this up so that they know, okay, yeah, if we want you back, we want you back, but only under these circumstances. No Alan Lazard, no Randall Cobb, no Big Bob Tunyon. And we're doing that saying, yeah, we want you back, but in a situation where it's not the best. And we know that that's not all that appealing to Aaron Rodgers. Then you're stacking the deck a little bit on where this is all going. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to think that Green Bay would be doing. Then you're able to have a more one-track plan. But I think they have to have a two-track plan. If for no other reason, then you just don't know what you're going to get in a trade either. Because you could go to the Jets and they might get desperate and put a player on the board you never thought would be available. Or you might call the Raiders and they might put something on the board that you never thought would be available. And now that changes your whole outlook on everything that you're trying to figure out. Okay, what comes next? Clarity for this team. And we've seen this before. There were reports over the last couple seasons that, hey, the Packers want to be making these moves, but the fact that we don't have clarity on the Aaron Rodgers situation is making this tough. That started in 2021. We had reports that the Packers wanted to make some moves, but Aaron Rodgers' contract situation, they weren't sure what was going on there. They had to move around some money. And then in 2022, we didn't know until, moments before free agency, Rodgers was going to be around. And so that screws up your whole offseason planning. And it's even more in flux now because it's not just either back or not back. It is back or traded or retired. Like there's a lot more that seems to be on the table this time. We're doing it again. We're doing it again. I wish that this wasn't happening, but this is where we are. So a lot more to come this week. Marshall Newhouse, former Green Bay Packers Super Bowl champion, on the show talking about Aaron Rodgers. Carson Palmer from Radio Row talking about his career, his situation in Cincinnati, forcing his way out of there, what he thinks Aaron Rodgers should do as someone who shared an agent with Aaron Rodgers. Some good insight coming there. More to get to this week. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, we'll be doing that. When Aaron Rodgers makes a decision, we'll probably have a live show. If the Packers make some moves, make a big trade, we'll probably have a live show. So come check out our YouTube page to stay Locked On Packers.